President Donald Trump met Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing during a two-day summit between May 13th and May 15th. Just 10 days ago in Beijing, Xi Jinping said that the two superpowers should be partners, not rivals. During the meetings, they discussed fragile trade relations, the Iran war, and the Taiwan issue. But the most important moment came before Xi Jinping sat down with Trump. He asked one question: can we escape the Thucydides Trap? This question comes from a book written 2,500 years ago. Thucydides was an Athenian historian and commander. In the 5th century BC, he fought as a general in the wars between Sparta and Athens. Later, he wrote about what he saw in his work called History of the Peloponnesian War. According to Thucydides, Sparta became afraid as it watched Athens grow. Not only because of its army. Sparta feared Athens' ports, trade networks, and money. As Athens became richer, allies started moving away from Sparta. Because money comes before power. Alliances are built before swords are drawn. According to Thucydides' argument about great power rivalry, rising powers in international politics always threaten or challenge the dominant powers with their growing military and economic strength. Conflicts between rising and dominant states often lead to major wars that can completely change the system. Graham Allison, who served as Assistant Secretary of Defense under every U.S. administration from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, called this pattern between rising and dominant powers the Thucydides Trap. Graham Allison applied this pattern to 500 years of history. He studied 16 cases. What happened when a rising power met an established power? In 12 cases, war broke out. Only 4 ended peacefully. But those 4 cases had one thing in common. Both sides understood the value of economic interdependence. They knew that destroying the other side would also destroy themselves. In 2000, China made up only 3% of the world economy. Today, it is around 17%. This growth was presented to the world as a miracle. Newspapers called it historic. Economists called it an economic miracle. But miracles do not show the foundation. Miracles only show the result, not the system behind it. So let's talk about the foundation. When Deng Xiaoping came to power in 1978, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. Income per person was only a few $100s in today's money. There were almost no factories. Infrastructure was in ruins. Most of the rural population lived near starvation. Deng changed everything, and China started running. For the next 40 years, the economy grew by around 9% on average. No economy in history had grown this large this fast. More than 800 million people escaped poverty. Cities rose from the ground. Factories supplied entire continents. Port capacity reached record levels. The numbers today look unbelievable. China's GDP was $1.2 trillion in 2000. It reached $6 trillion in 2010. In 2023, it passed $17.5 trillion, when measured by purchasing power parity. Some studies say China became the world's largest economy. But this growth was not a miracle. It was an engineering project. And like every engineering project, some safety margins were sacrificed to increase speed. Let's look at foreign trade. Today, China is the world's largest exporter of goods. Its yearly exports are worth more than $3.5 trillion. From electronics to textiles, from machinery to chemicals, China sends products to every part of the world. But it is also a massive importer. Its yearly energy imports are worth more than $500 billion. China imports around 70% of its oil. Food imports have tripled over the last decade. From soybeans to meat products, from rice to cotton, China's dependence on foreign agricultural products is growing. Semiconductors, integrated circuits, and high-tech parts are still mostly imported. So on one side, China is the factory of the world. On the other side, it is one of the world's biggest buyers. This balance keeps the system alive. Export income pays for import costs. Dollars come in, dollars go out. The system works like an engine. As long as the engine runs, everything looks stable. But what happens if the engine slows down? Now let's move to foreign aid and investments. Over the last 20 years, China has transferred hundreds of billions of dollars to more than 150 countries. It built ports in Africa, railways in Southeast Asia, mines in Latin America, pipelines in Central Asia. These were not acts of charity. They were strategic investments. Every port could become a naval base. Every debt could become leverage. Every infrastructure project became a channel of influence. China's foreign policy placed economic tools before military and political goals. And for a while, this strategy worked. Under this growth was the banking system. China's banking sector became more than 3 times larger than the country's yearly economic output. Let's compare this with America. In the United States, this ratio is close to 1. This means China built one of the most leveraged financial systems in the world during the last 20 years. And half of this system depended on one sector: real estate. And real estate does not only mean housing. It means collateral, local government income, household wealth, and psychological security. Everything depended on the same foundation. But now that foundation is cracking. Housing prices in major cities have fallen. Projects were left unfinished. Developers still look alive on paper, but in reality many are bankrupt. Millions of mortgages are still being paid for apartments that were never delivered. Losses are not being realized, only delayed and renamed. And if this happened in an open system, markets would panic loudly. But China is a closed system. Losses are hidden inside balance sheets. Liquidity is quietly restricted. Confidence is managed instead of restored. But there is an important point that many analyses miss. Economic growth is not only about prosperity. China's rise was connected to 4 major strategic goals. These goals were never openly announced, but they appeared in every policy decision, every investment, and every diplomatic move. The first goal was to become the dominant power in the Asia-Pacific region. For most of history, China was the unquestioned center of this geography. During the Ming Dynasty, Chinese fleets sailed across the Indian Ocean before Europe even entered global oceans. Neighboring states were connected to Beijing through the tribute system. Greater China was not just a territory. It was a civilizational claim. In the 17th century, this system collapsed. The Opium Wars, the Japanese invasion, and Civil War changed everything. Chinese historians call this period the Century of Humiliation. Beijing never forgot it. Today, China wants to reverse that century. It wants to slowly remove America's military presence from the Asia-Pacific region, redefine regional economic integration on its own terms, and reopen a historical chapter that was once closed. This is not revenge. It is a desire for restoration. The second goal was to increase control over disputed territories: Taiwan, Hong Kong, the South China Sea, and Tibet. These are the red lines of Chinese foreign policy. Taiwan is an existential issue for Beijing. The island's status is not only about territory, but also political legitimacy. The Communist Party's story of staying in power is connected to the promise that Taiwan will one day reunite with China. The South China Sea is another calculation. More than 30% of global maritime trade passes through these waters. China claims almost the entire sea based on historical rights. It built artificial islands, created military bases, and rejected international court decisions. This is not only about territory. Whoever controls this sea and these straits controls Asia's trade flows. The third goal was to expand its sphere of influence. China designed the Belt and Road Initiative for this purpose. 150 countries, hundreds of projects, trillions of dollars. But there is something beyond infrastructure. Whoever builds the 5G infrastructure sets the security standards. Whoever operates the ports sees the data. Whoever finances development banks influences political decisions. These dependencies were built without drawing swords. And this may be one of the most effective tools of power in the 21st century. The fourth goal was to gain respect in world politics. America exported democracy. China wants to export a development model. A model without elections and civil freedoms, but with fast growth, infrastructure, and stability. This model is especially attractive in parts of Asia and Africa because many countries are more focused on development than democracy. And when you look at these four goals, one thing becomes clear. All of them require money. Military modernization needs money. Artificial islands need money. Belt and road projects need money. Diplomatic influence needs money. Influencing international institutions needs money. That money came from economic growth. Growth came from exports. Exports came from factories. Factories came from cheap credit. Cheap credit came from a banking system supported by real estate. Every link in the chain is connected, and now one link in that chain is breaking. Of course, this will also affect the rivalry with America. Think about it. Every day, China imports huge amounts of energy, food, and raw materials. It produces goods for global supply chains. None of this is paid for with local currency. Everything is paid in dollars, and here the structural contradiction appears. Inside the country, local money can be printed endlessly. But outside, hard currency must be earned. Those dollars come from export income. If exports weaken, reserves come under pressure. When reserves come under pressure, controls become stricter. Foreign companies are already feeling this. Profits earned in China are becoming harder to move out. Approvals are slower. Documents are growing thicker. Explanations are becoming more unclear. Capital enters the country easily. Leaving the country is becoming harder. This is a signal. And signals must be understood before they become headlines. This financial pressure does not make the Thucydides trap inevitable. Instead, it makes it more complicated. Earlier, we mentioned the 4 cases in Allison's book that did not end in war. In all of those cases, economic interdependence became stronger than fear. Destroying one side meant destroying both sides. In this sense, America and China are the 2 most economically interconnected countries in history. American consumers use Chinese goods. China has invested heavily in American bonds. Supply chains are deeply connected. Technology transfers flowed between the 2 countries for decades. But now these ties are being cut. Both sides are creating policies to separate from each other. And this is where Thucydides' warning becomes updated. The fear is no longer only military. It is also fear of financial dependence. Fear that the other side may use economic weakness as a weapon. And this fear feeds miscalculations. Bond markets are usually quiet, but the most honest things are often said quietly. China's long-term interest rates remain extremely low. This is not optimism. It is an expectation that growth will not absorb the debt. Markets are saying something that official narratives do not say. The growth story has changed. And this change is also forcing America to rethink its strategy. If China becomes economically weaker, that does not automatically make it less dangerous. Historically, pressured powers often make the most unpredictable decisions. That was exactly why Sparta went to war. Athens was growing stronger, and Sparta believed it would not be able to compete in the long term. So maybe now was the time to fight. Maybe now was the time to take risks. Does this pattern sound familiar? Today, this pattern appears again in the Taiwan issue. As China's economy slows down, demographic pressure increases, and capital restrictions deepen. The calculations over Taiwan begin to change. Economic weakness does not always reduce military ambition. Sometimes it does the opposite. And this is where Allison's real lesson becomes important. Allison said that the Thucydides trap is not inevitable, but avoiding it is not automatic either. In the 4 cases that avoided war, leaders had to understand history, structure, and the fears of the other side, not only their own strength. Today, this means understanding the language of economic warfare. It means reading currency restrictions. It means hearing the silent warnings of bond markets. It means calculating the strategic effects of demographic trends. When money stops, other things begin. It has always been this way. Now I want to leave you with one question. Does China's financial weakness push it to escape the trap more carefully? Or does it push China into the trap faster? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because this question does not have one simple answer, and the answer may shape the next decade. If you want to follow these invisible layers of the global economy, the flow of money, the breaks in power, and the map history has drawn for us, this is exactly what we do here. The next story will explore a dimension of this picture that almost nobody is talking about yet.